My stepkids said their father was a man, not a winner with credit cards. I closed every account, left a note that said, "Now you deal with it," and walked out. Their tears were the receipt. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. When I married Emily, I thought I could build something unshakable. I thought love, if steady enough, could hold the weight of history, hers, mine, and the ghosts that hovered between. She had 3 children, Zach, Ethan, and Kate. Their father, Josh, existed like a shadow with a good haircut, appearing only when there was an audience, when there were photos to take or holidays to steal. He carried himself like a man who'd never done wrong, like absence was a kind of freedom. He'd show up every few months, pull into the driveway with music blaring, his car freshly washed, the kind of confidence that looks real until you stare too long. He came armed with gifts, phones, sneakers, a few words that glittered like lies dressed as wisdom. "That's what a real man does," he'd say, and the kids would drink it in like gospel. I told myself I could live with that one day they'd see the difference between stories and stability, between a father who played hero for a weekend and a man who stayed when it wasn't fun anymore. So I bought us a house outside Houston. 2 stories, brick and glass, a yard big enough for the boys to throw a football and for Kate to grow flowers that always seemed to wilt in the heat. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. I paid for everything. The mortgage, the insurance, the phones, the braces, the college funds that sat waiting for futures they hadn't earned yet. I wanted to build something that wouldn't crumble when the wind changed. At first, it almost worked. They called me Mike. Sometimes, in soft moments, in passing, even Dad. I lived for those slips, those tiny accidents of affection. They felt like proof that blood didn't matter as much as consistency. I told myself I was rewriting something ancient, that the word family could be rebuilt if I just held my ground long enough. But the cracks began quietly. They always do. It started with Zach. 15 then, restless, sharp around the edges, already wearing his father's smirk. He'd test me with small things, refusing to help with chores, shrugging when I spoke, pretending not to hear when I asked him a question. It wasn't defiance, not yet. It was indifference, that slow erosion that turns care into background noise. Kate was different. She didn't argue, she just withdrew. She floated through the house like a ghost, her headphones always in, her door always shut. She'd pass me in the hallway without a glance, as if eye contact might confirm something she didn't want to admit, that I existed. And Ethan, the youngest, followed their lead. He stopped talking to me altogether, his silence copying theirs like a new language he was eager to learn. When I asked for help around the house, dishes, yard work, simple things, I got that look. The same one every time. The same quiet message. "You're not Josh." Emily told me not to take it personally. "They're teenagers," she said. "They'll grow out of it." But they didn't grow out of it. They grew comfortable in it. Every act of disrespect became routine, folded neatly into daily life. When I came home late from work, the lights were on, the television blaring, plates left in the sink like a monument to indifference. The fridge was half empty, the trash overflowing. No one noticed. No one cared. I'd stand in the doorway some nights, watching them all. The 3 of them sunk into the couch, eyes glued to their phones, faces lit by the blue glow of screens I'd paid for. And I'd wonder if they even remembered who made it possible for them to sit there in peace, surrounded by things they hadn't earned. Sometimes, when they needed something, they'd soften. "Mike, can you drive me? Mike, can I borrow your card for gas?" Those moments used to make me feel needed. Later, I realized they were just transactions dressed as affection. Josh was their real dad, but I was the one writing checks. And somehow, in their minds, the math always favored him. One Christmas, Josh showed up with a box full of noise, new gaming systems, expensive headphones, the kind of excess meant to make up for absence. They tore into the wrapping like wild things, their laughter echoing off the walls. I stood there in the background, holding a plate of food that had gone cold. He looked at me across the room, gave that smug nod that men give when they know they've already won without trying. And I smiled back. What else could I do? That night, after he left, Zach called the console Dad's gift. Not Josh's. Dad's. The word hit harder than I expected. I'd bought them everything that mattered: security, stability, the roof over their heads. But in their eyes, I was a footnote. Still, I didn't give up. I told myself that patience was love, that silence was strength. I kept paying, kept showing up, kept building the illusion of a home that wanted me in it. But there's a kind of loneliness that only exists inside a family, when you're surrounded by people who depend on you, but none of them see you. It's quieter than anger, heavier than grief. It seeps in through the walls, through the space between laughter and silence. I started noticing small things. The way Emily's tone changed when she spoke to them versus when she spoke to me. The way she'd correct me softly under her breath when I asked them to do something, as if my authority needed her permission to exist. "They're just kids," she'd whisper, touching my arm. "Don't make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. Every time she stepped in, she erased me a little more. Every silence from her was another vote in their favor. I worked harder at my job. I started taking overtime shifts I didn't need, just to stay out of the house longer. Coming home late became a relief. The house was quieter when they were asleep, easier to believe it was mine. I'd sit alone in the living room some nights, lights dimmed, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I'd look around at the framed photos on the wall: birthdays, vacations, smiles caught in good lighting, and realize how many of them I'd taken, how few I was actually in. One night, Kate posted a picture online, a family shot from our summer trip to Galveston. In the caption, she wrote, "Vacation with Mom, Dad, and the boys." My name wasn't there. I wasn't even in the frame. Emily said it was just a mistake. But I knew better. Mistakes don't happen that often. I told myself to endure it, that someday they'd see. That one morning, Zach would thank me, Kate would smile like she used to, Ethan would talk again. But deep down, I knew I was chasing ghosts. Because respect isn't something you buy. It's something you're given. And no matter how much I spent, that debt was never going to be paid. Every Sunday, I mowed the lawn while they slept in. Every evening, I cooked dinner for people who barely looked at me. Every paycheck, I carved out a piece of myself to keep their lives running smooth. And every night, when I lay beside Emily, I felt her turn away just before sleep, as if the space between our backs had its own language, one that said, "You knew what you were getting into." Maybe she was right. Maybe I did. Maybe I thought I could rewrite blood with effort, replace history with presence. But standing in that house, the one I paid for, the one they disowned in silence, I began to understand something I had refused to see. You can't build a family on gratitude that was never there. You can't buy belonging. You can only rent it, and the rent always comes due. And though I didn't know it yet, the bill was already on its way. When Emily and I finally married, I thought the paper would make a difference. I thought a ring, a vow, a new name on the mailbox might steady the ground beneath us. Foolish hope. Paper doesn't make a family. It only exposes where the cracks already run. The wedding was small, her choice. White tents in the yard, fairy lights strung through the oaks, cheap champagne sweating in buckets of ice. Her children looked uncomfortable the whole night, dressed in clothes they hadn't wanted to wear. I caught Zach yawning during the vows, Kate scrolling her phone beneath the table, Ethan staring blankly into the distance, as though he was waiting for it to end. I told myself it didn't matter. Teenagers. Nerves. They'd come around once the music started. But then I heard Kate's whisper. She leaned toward her friend, half smiling. "Mom married Mike because he pays for everything." Her friend laughed. It was small, brittle, but it carried. The words landed like glass splintering in my chest. I remember looking across the yard, the fairy lights flickering, the music rising, Emily laughing with her sister, and realizing I was the only one who had truly believed this night meant something. I forced a smile, swallowed the hurt, poured myself another drink. Later that night, I tried to talk. I told them, all of them, that this was a new start, a real family now, that I loved them, that I wanted us to move forward together. Zach cut me off mid-sentence. "You're just Mom's husband," he said flatly. "Not our dad." Emily froze beside me. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She didn't correct him. She didn't say that's enough or don't talk to him like that. She just looked away, as if silence could soften cruelty. That was the first time I felt it, the realization that I wasn't a father in their eyes. I was a wallet with a pulse, a placeholder between their mother and the man who had given them his last name. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself that love was patient, that time would heal what resentment had built. I had no idea that patience, when wasted, turns into something bitter and corrosive. It happened 2 months later. A Tuesday. I come home early from work, a rare thing, planning to surprise them with takeout and a night in. I remember the house being unusually loud. Music, laughter, doors slamming. I set the bags down on the counter, ready to call out, when I heard my name. They didn't know I was there. Zach's voice first, sharp and mocking. At least our real dad knows how to be a man, not a winner with credit cards. Then Kate's. Yeah, Mike acts like we owe him something, like paying bills makes him a hero. Ethan laughed. That soft, cruel sound kids make when they don't yet understand what they're destroying. Let him keep trying. Nobody respects him anyway. I stood there in the hallway, the smell of fried rice cooling in the air, listening to the children I'd fed and clothed carve me apart with words. Something inside me, that quiet, stubborn faith, went still. Not broken, not raging, just still. I walked back out without making a sound. Sat in the truck for a long time, hands on the wheel, engine off. The sky above the neighborhood was turning red, the kind of sunset that makes everything look like it's on fire. Maybe it was. That night I didn't eat. I sat at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed and opened a notebook. For years I'd kept meticulous records. Bills, payments, tuition, medical, groceries. I added it up. 6 years. Nearly $300,000. $300,000 poured into people who couldn't spare a single word of gratitude. The number didn't make me angry. It made me empty. The next morning, Emily asked if something was wrong. I said no. I kissed her cheek, went to work, came home late, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, something had already shifted. From then on, I started to watch. Not to catch them doing wrong, just to see what I'd been blind to before. I saw how Zach used my car without asking, how Kate rolled her eyes every time I spoke, how Ethan vanished for hours and came back smelling like cheap beer. I saw how Emily ignored it all, calling it teenage years, while I paid the bills that made their rebellion possible. The distance grew. So did the silence. One evening, after dinner, Zach refused to clear the table. I asked twice. He didn't move. Emily stepped in, soft voice, apologetic smile, and repeated my request like it was hers. Only then did he obey. That small moment broke something final in me. My authority existed only when translated through her. Without her echo, I was nothing. I started sleeping less, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing their laughter drift down the hallway. Every sound felt like mockery. Every morning, the house looked a little less like mine. Then came the breaking point. It was Saturday. Emily was at work. The kids were sprawled in the living room, surrounded by empty chip bags and soda cans, the television blaring. I told them to clean up. Zach snorted without looking away from the screen. You're not our dad. Stop pretending. Kate's eyes flicked toward me, cold. This isn't your house. I didn't answer. Not at first. I just looked at them, the 3 lives I'd held together for years, and realized how completely they believed it. That this roof, this comfort, this safety had appeared out of thin air. That I was nothing more than background noise to their entitlement. So I stood, walked to my desk, pulled an envelope from the drawer, and returned to the table. Inside were copies of every document I owned, mortgage, bank accounts, utilities, the evidence of everything I had built. I placed it in front of them. What's this? Zach asked. My exit, I said. As of today, all accounts are closed. Every card, every payment, every automatic transfer, gone. The phones, the insurance, the cars, the college funds. From now on, you pay for yourselves. Kate's mouth twisted into disbelief. You're kidding. I shook my head. No. I'm done buying respect that never comes. They laughed at first. A short, uncertain sound. But I could see the flicker of fear behind it. I wrote something for you, I said, sliding a small note across the table. On it, one line, now suffer on your own. Then I walked out. No yelling, no threats, no explanations. Just the sound of my footsteps down the hall, the soft click of the door closing behind me. That night, I slept at a motel on the edge of town. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarettes, but I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. Missed calls from Emily, from Zach, from numbers I didn't recognize, probably friends, maybe relatives, maybe the school. I didn't answer any of them. By the third day, the chaos began. Credit cards declined, insurance canceled, bills bouncing. Emily finally got through to me, her voice breaking through tears. You can't do this, she said. They're your family. No, I said quietly. They're yours. Zach couldn't afford gas to get to school. Kate lost her dance classes. Ethan's phone line went dead. Their father sent them $50 and disappeared again. And only then, when the comfort collapsed, did they begin to understand who had held it up all along. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel triumph. Just a strange calm. The peace that comes when a man stops pretending that love can be bought, or that patience is the same as forgiveness. For years, I told myself that endurance was strength, that turning the other cheek made me noble. But that day I learned the truth. Endurance without respect isn't virtue. It's surrender. And I had surrendered enough. When I turned off the last account and saw the balance settle at zero, I felt lighter than I ever had inside that house. Lighter and infinitely colder. Because love, when unreturned, doesn't die, it hardens, calcifies into something sharp. And I had finally learned how to use it. A week passed before the silence turned into something heavier, the kind of stillness that hums right before a storm. Emily had been calling less, texting more. Short messages, half sentences. We need to talk. Please come home. The kids are scared. I didn't reply. Every word from her felt like an invoice I'd already paid. When I finally drove back, the house looked smaller. The grass overgrown, the porch light flickering, the mailbox stuffed with envelopes no one had bothered to open. I stood in the driveway for a long time before going inside. I didn't expect a welcome. I just wanted to see what absence had done. The living room smelled of stale air and resentment. Dishes in the sink. Dirty laundry on the couch. The comfort I'd built had already started to rot. Ethan was at the kitchen table, scrolling his dead phone out of habit, hoping maybe the screen would light again. Zach sat in the recliner, eyes red, jaw tight. Kate stood by the window, arms crossed, pretending she didn't care that the world around her was collapsing. No one spoke when I walked in. Even the dog, the only creature in that house that had ever met me with joy, stayed curled in his corner. Emily arrived from work half an hour later. Her eyes were swollen, her voice rehearsed. We need to talk, she said again, as if repetition could undo what had already been set in motion. I nodded toward the dining table. Then let's eat first. Cooked. Not for them, for the ritual. For the quiet finality of it. Pasta, bread, the cheap red wine Emily liked. The smell filled the house. And for a moment I could almost believe we were normal again. Almost. We sat in silence. Forks scraping plates. The tension thick enough to choke on. I looked at each of them in turn. Zach's defiance. Kate's coldness. Ethan's nervous fidgeting. Emily's exhausted stare. For people bound together by nothing but history and debt. How was your day? I asked, voice even. Zach didn't look up. Why do you care? Because I used to. Kate's eyes narrowed. You can't just leave and come back like nothing happened. I smiled faintly. You're right. Nothing happened, that's the problem. The silence that followed was sharper than any argument. Then Zach pushed back his chair, his tone dripping with contempt. You're not our dad. Stop pretending. Kate's voice joined his, low but venomous. This isn't your house anymore. Emily's fork clattered against the plate. That's enough. No, I said quietly. Let them finish. They didn't. They didn't need to. The sentence had already been carved into the walls. Not our dad. Not your house. I stood slowly, reached into my jacket, and pulled out an envelope. Placed it on the table between the plates. What's that? Ethan asked, voice small. Everything, I said. Mortgage statements, credit accounts, the bills you never see, the ones that kept this place standing. Emily frowned. Mike, please. As of tonight, I continued. It's all closed. Every payment, every card, every safety net I built for you. Gone. Kate scoffed. You can't just walk away. I looked at her. I already did. Then I took out a smaller note, a single line written in my handwriting. I slid it across the table toward Zach. He read it aloud before realizing what it meant. Now suffer on your own. For a moment no one breathed. Then chairs scraped, voices rose, panic clawed at the air. Emily demanded explanations. The kids shouted questions that weren't questions at all. Accusations, pleas, curses. I didn't answer any of them. I simply picked up my coat, walked to the door, and left. No goodbyes. No shouting. Just the sound of the lock clicking behind me. That night I slept in the truck again. The engine off, the windows cracked, the darkness pressing close. It wasn't comfort, but it was peace, the first kind I'd felt in years. By morning, the messages began. Emily's first, you've made your point. Come home. Then another, please. They're terrified. Then, you can't do this to them. But I could. And I had. By the third day, the storm broke. The credit cards were frozen. The insurance lapsed. The car payment defaulted. Ethan's school called. Kate's dance studio left a voicemail about overdue fees. Zach's phone was disconnected altogether. Each message that reached me was another thread snapping. Finally, Emily called from a borrowed number. Her voice cracked the moment I answered. They're falling apart, Mike. Zach can't get to school. Kate's crying. Ethan. Ethan what? I asked. He said he hates you. I waited a beat. Good. At least it means he's still thinking about me. You can't just cut them off, she said. They're kids. No, I said. They're consequences. She started to sob. Please, they need you. I closed my eyes. No, Emily. They need their father. Her silence on the other end was worse than the crying. It was the silence of someone realizing that the safety net she'd relied on wasn't made of love anymore. It was made of obligation, and it had finally torn. Later that week, I heard from a neighbor that Josh had shown up again, pulled into the driveway like a savior, engine roaring, sunglasses glinting, swagger intact. He stayed 15 minutes, dropped off some cash, said a few words that probably sounded noble. Then he left. By the next day, Emily called again, this time without tears. He can't help, she said quietly. He doesn't have it. I said nothing. They're scared, she whispered. I don't know what to do. You learn, I said. The way I did. She hung up. 2 days later, I drove past the house after work. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. The yard looked wild, unkept. Through the glass, I could see movement, shadows of people who'd never looked smaller. I didn't stop. I didn't honk. I just kept driving. Took another week for the calls to slow. When they did, something inside me unclenched. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was clean. I spent those evenings alone in a cheap motel room, eating takeout, watching the city lights through the blinds. The phone on the nightstand buzzed from time to time. Emily, unknown numbers, maybe even the kids, but I never picked up. The world could burn for all I cared. On the 12th day, a text arrived from Zach. We get it. You win. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because it wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about ending the war I'd been drafted into the day I said I do. People talk about forgiveness like it's some kind of freedom. But forgiveness is only freedom for the ones who wronged you. For the rest of us, there's only acceptance, the cold kind that doesn't heal but stops the bleeding. When I signed the papers to sell the house months later, I walked through it one last time. Every room was smaller than I remembered. The walls scuffed, the air stale, The echo of laughter that wasn't real still hung there, like the ghost of a family that never existed. In the kitchen drawer, I found one thing I hadn't expected. The note I'd written, "Now suffer on your own." Someone had unfolded it, smoothed it flat, left it there like a relic. The edges were damp, wrinkled from tears. I stood there for a long time, holding it between my fingers. Then I folded it once more, slipped it back where I'd found it, and walked out. Outside, the air smelled of rain. The for sale sign swayed in the wind. I didn't look back when I started the car, because that house was never mine, not really. It was a monument to effort without reward, love without return. And I had already buried enough of myself inside its walls. As I drove away, I thought of Emily's last words to me on the phone. "You're destroying this family." Maybe she was right, or maybe I just stopped pretending it was one. Either way, the silence that followed was the truest sound I'd ever heard. Dallas was quieter than I remembered. The city hums differently when you're nobody's provider. No one waiting at the window. No one tracking the hours you're late. I rented a small apartment north of the Trinity. 1 bedroom, cracked tile, a balcony that looked over a parking lot. It smelled of dust and new beginnings. I slept the first night without setting an alarm, without the ache of responsibility clawing at my chest. For the first time in years, the silence didn't accuse me, cradled me. I woke up before dawn anyway. Habit. The kind that doesn't leave even after love does. I made coffee, watched the sun bleed across the buildings, and realized how foreign peace can feel when you've forgotten what it costs. There was no shouting from another room, no slammed doors, no faint echo of Emily's voice trying to keep the peace. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. That's how freedom sounds. Small, steady, unremarkable. The weeks blurred. I worked, paid rent, ate simple meals, learned how little a man actually needs when no one is taking from him. There was pain, of course, a kind of phantom limb where the family used to be. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to check if Zach had made it to class, or if Ethan had that science project due, or if Kate needed a ride. Then I'd remember, none of that belonged to me anymore. Emily called twice that first month. Once to yell, once to plead. Both times I listened. Both times I said nothing. The second call ended with her whispering, "You've changed." I almost laughed. Change implies something new was built. But I hadn't built anything. I'd only stopped carrying what was killing me. The letters started 6 months later. Thin envelopes at first, written in uneven handwriting. Kate's came first. "I'm sorry." 2 pages of apologies that smelled of perfume and regret. She wrote about missing dance, about missing me, about realizing too late that gratitude should have come sooner. I read it once and put it away. I didn't hate her. I just didn't trust her words. Children learn to mimic remorse long before they understand it. Then Ethan wrote. His letter was shorter, messier. I didn't know what to say when they said those things. I should have said something. "I wish you'd come back." I folded it neatly, slid it into a drawer, and left it there. Silence was the only reply I had left to give. Zach's letter arrived last. No return address, no apology. Just one line, "You were right." I stared at that sentence for a long time. 3 words. 6 years of contempt and rebellion condensed into the quiet admission of a man who'd finally been forced to see himself. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt old. Older than I was. Because by the time truth arrives, it never brings anything worth keeping. Sometimes I wonder what became of them after. Whether Emily found another man to hold up her world. Whether Josh crawled back into their lives when the dust settled. Whether the kids still talk about me when the bills come due. Maybe they tell the story differently. Maybe in their version I'm the villain who abandoned them. The cold man who turned his back on children that weren't his. And maybe that's fair. Every story needs a villain. And I was done being their martyr. The apartment slowly became a home. Sparse furniture, clean lines, no ghosts. I bought plants I kept alive. A bookshelf. A dog. An old rescue mutt that limped but followed me everywhere. His name is Copper. He doesn't care who I am, what I've paid for, or whose father I failed to be. He just waits by the door when I come home, tail thudding against the wall like forgiveness that doesn't ask for anything in return. And then there was Jenna. I met her at a hardware store of all places. She was standing in the aisle holding 2 light bulbs and arguing with herself about wattage. I told her to buy both. Life's too short to debate brightness. She laughed. That laugh stayed with me. We talked. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekends. I told her everything. Not the polished version, not the pity story, the truth. She didn't flinch. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened, then said, "You deserved better than that." No one had ever said that to me before. Not once. We've been together a year now. No drama. No ghosts. Just quiet mornings and honest words. She has no children, no hidden debts, no half-built loyalties. When she says thank you, she means it. When she touches my hand, it's not a transaction. Peace doesn't have fireworks. It has weight and warmth and the kind of silence that feels earned. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear echoes, fragments of the old house, the laughter that wasn't real, the sharp words that turned me to stone. I see Zach's glare, Kate's indifference, Ethan's silence, Emily's tired eyes. They visit me in dreams sometimes, always the same. Standing in the doorway of that Houston house, asking for something I no longer have to give. I wake up sweating, heart pounding, and realize it's just memory trying to collect a debt. One morning, I found an old photograph tucked inside a box I hadn't opened since the move. The 5 of us taken during the first summer in that house. I was grilling. Emily had her arm around me. The kids were smiling, half forced, half real. Back then, I thought it was proof we were becoming a family. Now I see what I missed. The distance in their eyes, the polite stiffness of obligation. Picture of hope, not belonging. I almost threw it away. Instead, I slid it into the back of a drawer, beneath the letters. Not out of sentiment, out of honesty. You shouldn't erase what shaped you, even if it hurt. You should remember it clearly so you never walk that road again. Sometimes, when Jenna asks why I'm so quiet, I tell her I used to mistake endurance for love. That I used to think giving endlessly would earn me a place in someone else's story. She touches my hand and says, "You're here now. That's enough." And maybe she's right. Maybe peace isn't about being loved by everyone. Maybe it's about finally loving yourself enough to stop begging for scraps of respect. Every so often, I drive south toward Houston, not to see them, just to remind myself I survived it. I pass the exit that leads to our old street, slow down, then keep going. I don't look back. The past is still there, rusted, waiting, but it can't reach me anymore. It's strange, though. Even now, part of me wonders what would happen if one of them knocked on my door. If Zach showed up older, humbled. If Kate wanted to talk. If Emily wanted forgiveness. Would I open the door? Would I let them in? I don't know. I tell myself I wouldn't. But there's a quiet ache that never quite leaves. The kind that comes from knowing you tried to love people who weren't capable of returning it. Still, I don't regret leaving. The regret would have been staying. The regret would have been dying slowly in that house, paying for their comfort while starving for their respect. I gave them everything I had, time, money, faith, and they called it nothing. Now, in the small apartment above a street that hums at night, I have nothing left to give, and somehow that feels like freedom. Sometimes I still hear those words. A winner with credit cards. They used to haunt me. Now they make me smile. Because that winner built their world. And when he left, he took it with him. I sit on the balcony most evenings. Copper at my feet. Jenna reading beside me. The sun drops behind the buildings, and the sky burns gold for a few minutes before the dark settles in. It's my favorite time, the quiet in-between, when the world exhales. I think about everything that led me here, all the pieces of myself I left behind to make room for peace. Was I wrong? Maybe. Maybe a better man would have stayed, kept paying, kept swallowing his pride. Maybe love is supposed to hurt that way, but I'm done mistaking pain for purpose. I gave them a home and they gave me a lesson. Fair trade. So I ask you, if the people you carried refused to see you until you put them down, what would you have done? Would you have kept carrying them? Or would you, finally, have walked away and learned how to live again?